Okay, we are recording. I forget which one this is. We're getting up there though. This is like 17, 18, or 19 of our sessions on the practice of the presence of God. And before we dive into the text, anybody have anything that they were processing through the week, something left over from last week that you want to bring up today before we get going? Old business before the new business. No? Going once?
I just want to say how thankful I am for you all.
Oh, thanks, Lori.
It's
Glad you're here, Lori.
I just can't speak, but thank you.
Dave?
That's the connection that just a second, Linda. That's the connection we're talking about, and this is the amazing thing, because I really didn't think Zoom was going to work. When we first started this at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a bust. But it is amazing how the technology does disappear and we're just connecting. And so, for some of us to be able to still connect, like with Vaughn and with others and William, who have moved out of the area, and Lori, and it's just so great. Ken joining us recently. This is wonderful. So Lori, I'm glad you're feeling as strongly about this as we are. And we are so glad that you found us. Yeah. Okay, Linda, what's up?
I can't see anyone because
Okay, see the little blue button that says got it?
where
Click the blue button. There
blue
should be a blue button that says got it.
where I'm not seeing it.
I don't know what to tell you then. There should be if there's a big window on top of your screen, there should be a blue button that says got it. You press that and it'll go away.
It might not be blue.
Okay.
It says
under a
got
bunch
it,
of
Linda.
What?
Under a bunch of
Do you
words.
see words that say got it?
Let's see here. No, I just see your names and leave meeting and got it. Oh, I just found it. Is that?
Click on got it.
Click on that.
Sorry, you guys. Oh, is that all you have to do?
That's
That's
all
all
you
you
have
have
to
to do.
That's it.
Do
It's so
that.
simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's
All right,
simple
good.
once you understand.
Yeah. Anything else before we dive in? Okay, let's go to page 53, which is actually not numbered. So go to page 52 and look to your right. How about that? We are on the fifth letter, and we only got in a couple of paragraphs, I think 3 paragraphs last week. So what I want to do is just start from the top. We won't spend a lot of time on the first page, and then we'll get into the new stuff just so we can get this all in context and get a good running start for it and all of that. We really got stuck last week on servile fear. Oh yeah, I think we spent 45 minutes on that. It was really a great discussion.
Oh, yeah.
So thanks for that. So we're in the fifth letter. This is the first letter he's writing to a reverend father who possibly was the head of another monastic community. We don't know, but he's a priest. He could be an abbot. And this one I find really interesting because even though Lawrence is coming in, as in a subservient way, in submission to this priest who has a higher station than he does religiously, right? And he's asking for his help and his opinion. He's really, in the subtext, schooling him. And so I love the tone that's going on here. There is the kind of implication that this priest may not be in the same kind of contemplative page that Lawrence is, and he is trying to get across what he has learned and trying to help this priest to break through to another level, but he's doing it in such a way that he's coming in as the student. But at any rate, see what you think about that, and especially as he wraps it up, see if what you feel about Lawrence's subtext here. At any rate, he says, "My reverend father, although I do not find my manner of life in books, I am not at all disturbed by this. Nevertheless, to reinforce my confidence, I would appreciate knowing your feelings on the state in which I find myself." So as we pointed out last week, he doesn't find in writing in books the kind of devotional and contemplative practice that he is practicing. So he's asking for the Father's opinion. But at the same time, he doesn't really care. This is what he's found. He knows this is his way of proceeding. Several days ago, in a conversation with a religious person, she told me that the spiritual life was a life of grace, which begins in servile fear, is increased by the hope of eternal life, and is consummated in pure love, that each of these states has different stages by which one finally achieves that blissful consummation. And we read a little piece on servile fear last week. Basically, servile fear is the fear of punishment. Okay, it comes in as the servant would come into the master, as a fear of being punished if you don't serve in the manner that you're supposed to serve. And this was contrasted with filial fear, and filial means son or daughter in Latin. And so the fear of the child of the master is one of damaging the relationship. So rather than a fear of punishment, the fear is if I do something that damages the relationship, that would be the worst thing that I could deal with. So we kicked around those two last week. But her 3-step process in the spiritual life is starting with the fear of punishment, moving to a hope for reward, right? And then being able to move into pure love. And what we came out with is that, and of course, Brother Lawrence is going to dispute this method, is that Jesus was always telling us that like breeds like. You can't get figs from thorn bushes. And so to start with fear and think that you're going to end up in pure love runs afoul of what Jesus is trying to teach us. We need to use the means, the means that we use should match the ends that we seek. So if we are looking for pure love, then we need to start with love. We can't start with fear. But the church has always used fear to try to drive people into the arms of a loving God. But we also know that fear is the fastest way to motivate anybody and to control them. So there's a lot of things going on here. So he was told by this woman, this religious person, that this is the 3-step process. He says in the next paragraph, I have not followed all of these methods. On the contrary, I know not why. They discouraged me from the first, which was the reason why, on my entrance into religion, I resolved to give myself entirely to God in reparation for my sins and to renounce everything for his love. So this kind of religious thinking was discouraging to him, even when he first entered the monastery. And so his resolve was simply to move into total surrender, move into complete submission, and throw himself on the mercy of God. Because he says repeatedly, he knows that he's not worthy of God's love and attention, but he gets it anyway, right? Which is kind of a beautiful thing.
So do religions, like people, like, because the religion that I left, it was really that base. It was fear and control to motivate. Do these people realize, I think for the big organization I left, they know what they're doing. But some people seem really sincere about this whole fear and control. So, I don't know. Does it really matter? Do they really know that that's what they're doing?
You mean the religious organization, the institution itself?
Do they know that that's a business? Is that just a business model and they're fully aware of it? Because like I say, the big box store religion I left is very aware of that. But for smaller organizations, how many are really sincere that they really believe that themselves? And how many have used that to bank?
Well, that would be impossible to know, but I guarantee you that there are people who are sincerely feeling that this fear is what is going to drive them forward and is the surest way to bring people into the kind of performance that will, the practice and the performance that will bring God's approval and love, because they're still working from a more legal perspective, where our relationship with God is essentially contractual. We perform to the letter of the law, and then God will save us, and God will approve of us and do the things that we want him to do. And so in that kind of paradigm, then the fear is appropriate, right? Because there is punishment that we're trying to avoid, and we're going to avoid it by doing what we're supposed to do, and therefore we will get the reward. So from fear of punishment to hope of reward, and to the pure love connection, for someone who sincerely believes that, they're working the best that they can, you know.
Dave, I think myself, having grown up in a very conservative church as well, my dad was pastor of those churches, studied that stuff, and taught it himself. I believe from him, it was truly for him, it was a sense of purpose and reason for being. And so that's what I learned. So it took a while before I finally broke free of that, which then sent me into spinning, which when I met you had been spinning for quite some time, looking for other options. But for those who are in the big box church who know what they're doing, it's like a cult. The cult leader knows what they're doing, but the true sycophants on the periphery don't know, but they're just trying to earn their way into the inner core. Once you get the inner core, you realize how corrupt that is. It's very disturbing. That's my sentiment.
And I think you're right. You know, I suppose there are those who are using fear to manipulate and to control, and they do know what they're doing from that respect, and it's about power to them. But even if you're in a church like that, as Vaughn is alluding to, you know, there are people who are sincerely trying to follow Jesus to the best of their ability within those. And, you know, there are going to be people in other churches, disciplines or traditions that we would find, you know, off-putting, that, you know, are just as connected or more so to God than any of us or anyone else that we might hold up. And so it's the individual heart that sanctifies the institution and not the other way around. And so it's real important for us to remember that good things can still be happening even under difficult circumstances, and not to cast aspersions on that. It's just that what we're trying to do here is remove all the blockages and limitations to being able to see that God's love doesn't work that way, not according to Jesus and not according to Lawrence either, that it is something wholly different than that there is no punishment in God's love. And that's something that takes some getting used to. You know, Brother Lawrence took 10 years to get used to that. And then finally, at some point, had to give himself permission to be okay in this, even though he couldn't find it written in books anywhere, anything corroborating what it was he was feeling. He's really a salmon here. He's swimming upstream, standing his lumber against the grain here of usual Catholic theology and practice and culture and all of that. So that was a lonely place to be. And yet he didn't feel that loneliness because he had this connection with God that was so extraordinary, and that trumped everything for him, right?
There's the heretic I love.
All right. So continuing on, during my early years, I meditated in my prayers on death, judgment, hell, paradise, and my sins. So in his early years, he's trying to go with a program, right? I continued in this manner for several years, assiduously devoting myself the rest of the day, even during my work, to the presence of God, whom I felt was always near me, often in the deepest recesses of my heart. A practice which so heightened my concept of God that only faith was capable of satisfying me about this concept. So what's he saying here? When he was obligated to go into certain devotional practices, whatever it happened to be within his community, he was trying to do what he was told to do by those around him. The rest of the day, while he's just doing his work, he is just focused on the presence of God. And that's what eventually flips the scales for him. That practice of the presence of God is what filled him up. And though he couldn't find it anywhere else in any of the writings or the teachings, he says that only faith was capable of satisfying me about this concept. He just had to take it on faith. He just had to believe that this experience that he was having was more real than the teaching that he was getting from his institution. Making sense?
Yes.
And I love that. I love that. This is what we all need to do. Doesn't matter who's trying to teach you, whatever they're trying to teach you. Hopefully they're sincerely trying to help you, but they're all limited, because once we reduce this these concepts of God to words, we've already stepped away from God. It's the pure experience that is really going to take us to what we're convinced of. And once we're convinced of that, now we have something that is truly life-changing, as it was for Lawrence. And then we'll have the audacity, as Brother Lawrence does, to fly in the face of those elders and those authority figures who have been teaching us something different. You know, hopefully we'll also have the humility to approach it in the way that Brother Lawrence is approaching it. Look at, he's coming in as this submissive, right, to the priest, but at the same time, he's schooling him. Yeah, I love that. But he comes in with that humility. He doesn't come in arrogantly. He doesn't tell the priest he's wrong. He says, you tell me what you think about this. But he is absolutely convinced. As you go on through this letter, you see him getting pretty bold. I love that. So even though there's no theology or books describing what he has found in God, he's realizing there is no punishment there. Even when he goes to God with his sins, goes to God with his failings, and is expecting some kind of punishment, all he gets is love. Every time that he goes into God's presence, all he gets is the love and the consolations and the encouragement and that feeling of connection that he doesn't even believe he deserves, because that's what he's been taught. And he knows how fallible he is as a human being as well. Now he moves on to the next phase, right? In the next paragraph, gradually I found myself doing the same thing during this time formerly set aside for prayer, which caused me great delight and great consolation. So this is where I'm talking about. In his formal prayer time, he was trying to toe the line and do what he was supposed to do, right? Focus on his sins, find that servile fear, and hope for reward. But in his off time, in his free time, he's just practicing the presence of God. That takes over so much, you know, kind of like the leaven Jesus talks about. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman puts into a peck of flour, and then it leavens the whole thing. He just gets leavened up. So now it bleeds over into his formal times of prayer, where all he's doing there is just, again, practicing the presence of God, right? Gradually, I found myself doing the same thing. What thing? Practicing the presence of God during the time formally is set aside for prayer, which caused me great delight and great consolation. Now he's having all presence all the time. I must tell you, though, that during the first 10 years, I endured great suffering. The apprehension of not being with God as I wished, my sins constantly on my mind, and the great graces which God constantly showered on me were the cause and source of all my difficulties. So in those first 10 years, he was trying to do it the way they were telling him to do it, and it caused him such pain and apprehension because he believed that his sins were keeping him from the presence of God, until he just allowed himself to be in God's presence and found something else was happening. He couldn't resolve that paradox, and he didn't really need to. Now, during this period, during that 10-year period, I often fell but raised myself up at once. It seemed to me that man, reason, and even God himself were against me, and that only faith was for me. So once again, just relying on that presence, on the action of moving into God's presence, that was the only thing. The other translation that I keep mentioning, that last line there, and that only faith was for me, was translated as that I just had to trust. So either way you go, and faith and trust are pretty much synonymous biblically. I was sometimes troubled by the thought that it was presumptuous of me to think that I had achieved quickly what others achieved only with difficulty. At other times, by the thought that I was deliberately damning myself, that there was no salvation for me. So this came so intuitively, so naturally for him when he practiced presence, that it was messing with his head, basically, right? He said, how could I possibly, I'm nobody. I'm this clumsy lummox that knocks stuff over all the time. How could I get this so easily when all these learned people around me, you know, are having such a hard time or had to work at it so hard to get there? And then at other times, am I just kidding myself? Am I just imagining that there's no punishment, that I'm connected with God when really I'm damning myself because I'm not doing all of the, you know, the things that I'm supposed to be doing to get absolution for my sins. So this is the mind games that he's playing himself because of how he was taught, because of the way everyone else was practicing their spiritual formation. Have any of you experienced something like this? Because I know I did. You know, when I was came back to Christianity in my early 30s into a very conservative evangelical church, and I really just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to go stage 2. You know, I just wanted to drink the Kool-Aid, you know, put on the clothes, the uniform, and just be on the inside looking out. And I tried so hard to fit in, and it just didn't fit. It didn't work. And yet at the same time, I thought there was something wrong with me. And these kind of mind games are constantly going on. There were things that I was starting to experience in my contemplative prayer life, which I couldn't even talk about because, you know, they would tell me I was wrong with contemplation. But I remember that kind of tug and pull back and forth as I tried to get forward until I finally got to the point that I just gave myself permission to be different. But that took years for me, and it was a difficult process. So when I read this, I know what he's talking about. Anybody else have that kind of experience as you have gone through? Okay, Lori.
I tried an evangelical church after I left the church that I had left. And I really did the same thing. And at first it felt so good. It felt so wonderful. But then I was taking a Bible class with a woman, and I said, you know, because since my husband's death, and then it's been a lot with my husband's death and then leaving that particular church. And I was just saying, I don't know what my purpose is. And she said, I know what your purpose is. Your purpose is to get people out of that church. And I said, I won't do it. I will not do that. You have no idea what you're asking. You have no idea. And I found I couldn't stay. And so it has been a real journey. But I admire Brother Lawrence so much because I couldn't stay within that system. For him to stay in the system and still have that spiritual growth, which I feel like I did, but there came a point in time I couldn't stay. I don't know how he did that because it's like two paradigms. And so I just admire that so much, to have the strength to stay within a system and still be true to himself.
Absolutely.
Well, for me, it's what you had taught me some years back with the ladies I go with at my Bible study. So they have more traditional, but the effect suits me better. So a few times I disagree, but then, okay, well, you know, there's what, 6, 7 of them, it's me. So I pose the challenging questions, but then I don't want to alienate myself, and I don't want to be considered a rebellious person. But yes, our leader who says, oh yeah, Ellen asked the challenging questions. I found that as, how do you say, a good description of me. Okay. But yet I enjoy the company. So sometimes, like you said too, leave the other things alone. So I'm able to do that. The other thing, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So later on, this was days later, so I didn't take it as directed to me, but the discussion went to things where yeah, we all have different interpretations or variations to it. Not me personally, but you know, other people in the community and other how do you call it, other denominations. So the leader did say, you cannot, how did she put it? You cannot change it to suit you, meaning it's like an all or nothing kind of thing. Whereas I found as I matured or grow, I have changed my perspective, whereas before it was childlike or childish. Now he has matured to where I am saying, if God is all forgiving and loving, why is there such a thing as punishment anyway? So that's where I'm at now.
Mhm. And that's such a powerful argument, because I got the same argument put at me that you can't just make this gospel be what you want it to be. I don't know how many of you have
Yeah.
that same kind of argument, but
Yeah.
that is a what we would call a stage 2 spiritual growth argument. That it's the belief system of the group that governs everything. When we see Jesus actually teaching, he's making sure that we understand that the law is here to serve and guide us, not as an absolute instrument that we must slavishly follow. I mean, read Matthew 5. That's everything he's trying to do, is to redefine the law so that we understand that there is not this absolute thing, that we have to actually move into relationship and move into the context of each moment to find out what it is that love actually requires. And how do we fulfill the law in this particular moment, in this particular situation? And so it's lived from the inside out and not from the outside in. And yet that fear of punishment is so strong at the beginning that those kinds of arguments, I mean, they spun my head around. For years, I kept going back and forth. Am I really okay? I don't know. I think I am, but I don't know. And scurrying back to my books and trying to, figure it out. So it's difficult to break through that.
Yeah.
But I
But
think that's exactly what Jesus is trying to get us to
Yeah,
do.
I think also, I never read Dante's Inferno, but I think he did the disservice to Western culture, because I saw the painting also, people with long tongues and fires and so on. So we as a culture took that as, see, this is what's going to happen to you. Right?
Yep.
So now I'm saying, well, that's in Dante's imagination. Just like the vampires. I don't know if there's real vampires. The movies made them have fangs and biting your neck. I don't know that they do that. Now that I look back, oh, the sun burns them. Really? Those are the imagination of script writers. Right?
Right.
We don't know.
I think where I can lean into this, and we've had this discussion before in here, I don't think it was in this book, but in previous books, about a sense of freedom that comes from following the rules, basically. So on one level, there is this urgent need to repent, right? An urgent need to recognize that you're in danger, and then we have this fire and brimstone kind of, you follow these rules or else kind of approach. And by simply humbling ourselves enough to where we can just follow the rules without question, I think that leads to the transformation. And I honestly believe that you can have the fear and the love together. Kind of like this idea that we progress at the pace of our pain.
Hey, William.
We progress at the pace of our desires and dreams, but most of us progress at the pace of our pain. And they both belong, right? And I think, I forgot who said it, but, the idea that Brother Lawrence, I think it was Lauren, the idea that Brother Lawrence can stay in his church, which is very, sounds like it was very fire and brimstone. But if he humbled himself enough, then he didn't have to, he was no longer guided by the fire and brimstone, but he was following the rules of us.
Hey, William, did you ever go to a church where when people went forward to receive forgiveness from God? Did you ever go? Have you ever been forward into church?
I mean, I've not attended as a member, but I've been in those situations, yes.
Did you ever feel called to go forward?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because I was so compelled to go forward as a pastor's kid. I was so convinced that it would make it a routine experience, need to go forward routinely, to the point my dad said, "Why are you going forward?" I even raised the question with him, is I didn't know, but there was some deep sense in which there was a need for continuous confession and reception of freedom, release, whatever, from anything you'd done, anything, even as a child, something you did wrong, something you said, so you did a bad word or whatever. So in the church I went to was a sense of deepening sense of you need this forgiveness or you're going to hell. Even as a child. You
I
never
would-
experienced that?
I have not.
I would say
Okay.
that's more an issue of devotion to the church. And I mentioned last week, and William said something, he used a word that defined it even greater, but he was not a learned person, but he was a very intelligent person, in my estimation. Intelligent insofar as the fact that he went beyond the dictates of the rules of the monastery or church, as it were, on beyond that to his direct relationship with God. And I believe that's what brought him his great spirituality and what some would call holiness, with his direct relationship with God that transcended the dictates and the rules, the rules of the church, where he lived and lived within the church, within the walls of that monastery,
Right.
24/7. So
I like that. I like that. But today I met with a client who kept talking about the 12 steps as a cult, right? And I've heard this before, right? From clients who basically they just didn't know how to just humble themselves and just follow the 12 steps, right? And yes, if you are an independent thinker and want to do your own thing and so on and so forth, and I can totally respect that, then the 12 steps would be perceived as this coercive group of people who are telling you this is what's going to work. But for the people it works for, they just surrender to it at some level.
Studies have shown, what's that? Sorry.
In the realm of the 12 steps, those who don't pay attention to the 12 steps don't understand the freedom that it gives you to think outside the 12 steps and apply the principles that are available there.
Right.
Principles.
I actually, can I chime in?
Go ahead, Allison.
Okay. I think it's really interesting that you brought this up because I see William's perspective completely, where rules sometimes with churches, they're meant to have, like, sometimes maybe the intentions might be good, teaching people to pray and to get connected, but it gets skewed. But I thought it was interesting that you brought up recovery, because as I'm reading this entire, or the 12-step program, as I was reading, going through this process of, even from the beginning when the lady was talking about, where it begins in servile fear and is increased by hope and eternal life and is consummated in pure love. That part that where we were stuck on the servile fear, for me, like, I kind of translated it differently. Whereas, like, sometimes we have to go through stuff to be able to get to the other side and understand, like, what pure love actually is. And then as we're going through this next section, and Dave was asking, can you relate to this? And I can relate to this, because the part where we're talking about during this period, I often felt, but raised myself up at once. It seemed to me that man, reason, even God himself were against me. Like, people just didn't understand. And I can relate it back to recovery, because I know for me, early on in recovery, I did everything they said to do. But the one thing I did over what is in a 12-step program is I made the connection with God number one. And that is the thing that transformed me. It was what Dave talks about. He talks about contemplative practice. That is meditating. That's waking up. And the first thing that is done is making that connection with God and connecting with him. And for me, I did not have to. I did not have to go through the 12 steps with a sponsor, because that spiritual awakening happened through the connection with God. Every step that happens in the 12-step process happened naturally with this connection with God, where all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And that's where I can relate to the lady in the beginning. And she's talking about sometimes this pain's so great. And it's like, who are you? What is this person? And then it's like, you know, a period of serious mourning and realizing there's no one to blame but ourselves for our actions, right? And then the period of like, okay, let's release this. And how can we be better people? But for me, I can relate to Brother Lawrence, because everyone kept telling me, do this, and do this, do this, do this. And I'm like, I don't think you get it. I've got it. Like, and I wouldn't say it like that, you know, but like, I get it. I'm connected with Source. Like, I am in pure connection with God. And anyways, I can relate to that, because I'm being told you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this. And I'm like, but like, I'm a different person. Like, this connection's different. So I hope that makes sense. And I thought it was interesting that you related it to the 12 steps. But like you're saying, is not everyone gets it, where it's like, you just, the simple stuff that Dave's talking about, like wake up and meditate, connect, get outside, do something, and get that connection. And it really feels amazing. So anyways, that's my little spiel.
You know, and here's the thing, I don't want you to think that I think that we don't need structure and we don't need rules, because we absolutely do. Without the structure that Allison's talking about, William's talking about, John's talking about, Vaughn's talking about, you know, we're lost. We need to have structure. But what we don't need to have is the fear of punishment behind the structure. Hopefully, we realize that the structure is going to be taking us where we want to go. Without the discipline to the structure, we don't get anywhere in spiritual formation. But if we're doing the whole thing slavishly just to avoid a spanking, that is not going to take us where we really want to go. And so, yes, we need the rules. The rules are important. And in a macro sense, you know, against macro sense, the rules need to stay. But like Allison's talking about, internally in the micro, the rules are more like training wheels on the bike. They keep us upright for that initial period so that we can get enough of this embedded deeply down into our spirits that now the prayer is saying us. We're not saying the prayer anymore. We are living the rules. We don't follow the rules. We're just living them because they become a part of who we are. That's the interior process that's going on. But to the group, we still need to just follow the rules so that the group can continue to stand and everybody can have a place in it. So that's the distinctions that we need to make. And so William is not wrong, right? He's right about that.
When I speak for myself on that topic, it's so many times I've gotten myself into trouble because I thought I was too smart to need to follow these stupid rules, right?
Yeah.
And just, I can look back after smashing myself against the rules a few times to realize, you know, I forgot who said it, you know, we don't break the laws, we break ourselves against the laws. It's, yeah, I think you just get smacked around enough until you get humiliated enough to develop the humility you need to just say, okay, these are the rules. So
That's good, William. Yeah.
whether we start from there or we end up there, it doesn't matter, right? These are the rules, you got to follow them or else.
And Brother Lawrence has a built-in humility, right? He comes to the whole deal with that built-in humility, even kind of a humiliation, you know, self-deprecation. But so he follows the rules. but he also realizes that the rules aren't taking him where he really wants to go. So when he's free from the rules in his personal time, he's just practicing presence until that just absolutely takes over his spirit. And then he brings that presence back to the rules, right? He still follows the rules, but now he's following them from the inside out as a part of this presence, and it's transformative. And I believe, Ellen, that's the way that Lori, that's the way that he can stay within the system and not have to leave it, because he finds the sanctity in the moment through the presence that even sanctifies the system. And he finds the permission not to have to follow it in terms of his mental processes, even though he's following the letter of the law within the rule of his house. But I think that's what allows him to stay there and not have to leave in order to find what he's looking for, because he's already found it right where he stands, whether it's in the kitchen or in the shoe cobbler's shop or wherever he is. And so one place is as good as another as far as the
I wish I could see it that way, because I'm so much happier in this space.
Mm.
You know, I feel so much more peace here. And it's how powerful is it with the power of intention, and what's my motivation? Because I'm in Al-Anon, and so I'm working on step 2, and I journal, because like when we're in class, I'm like, I consider this like class, and I'm taking notes. And the question today was, what is it that I want out of an existence in a relationship with my higher power? And it really is having the right motives behind what I do, because I really had to stop and look at my people pleasing. People pleasing is a lie. This is what I had to come, and I didn't mean it like I'm going to beat myself with stripes, but there were strings attached to my people pleasing. And so when I look at working through the steps, I admire you, Allison. You rock. I really admire you. Because I love my sponsor. She's quite spiritual. It's so great to have spiritual conversations. But I have to look within myself and say, why am I doing what I'm doing within Al-Anon? Is because I want to change my motives. I want to be genuine and not manipulative and controlling. And I didn't realize I was those things. And it's so humbling to realize I was those things. And then I, you know how it is that I really behave really good. And then it's like, I just went back to 5th grade. I just went back to 5th grade. So I love it here. That's all I can say. I'm glad I left Box Store. I love it here. I wish I could be like Brother Lawrence. This is good.
Yeah, and then Dave, even yourself, you had to leave where you were to get to where you are now, right? Sometimes you have to burn down the house to see the sky, right? You burned down the house, and you saw the sky, you started reaching out for more there, which brought me to you, because I've seen people inside the building which need to be burned, and I couldn't see the sky. So it wasn't until you left the environment, which I did as well, to get outside the strength and of that draw. That I love being dressed up too. I went to the point of singing a choir, for God's sakes, and to be part of, right, the sense of being purposeful. And so that's a very strong draw, as you wanted to be part of, but you had to leave it to get free to begin to experience what you do now, what you teach for us to be, again, to follow ourselves, right? Sometimes you need to get away.
But yeah, I mean, yes and no. Not all places are created equal, obviously. And there's going to be places that we are right in the center of our sweet spot, like Lori feels with our community, and we feel with our community too. And we're going to shine brighter and sing better on pitch in a community like this, right? Than maybe the other one. And so it's not that we have to stay, but we don't necessarily have to leave either. Yes, I did leave the evangelical church, but it wasn't because I was running away from something that hurt anymore. It was that I realized that by even trying to stay within the footprint of the statement of faith of that church, which as long as I was drawing a salary, I dedicated myself to staying within that footprint. But within that footprint, to push as hard as I could against the envelope to try to get the notion of the Father's love across. And even that was creating such factions within the church. I realized I was beginning to do more harm than good. And that's when I left. because I couldn't pull any more punches than I already was. And so I realized that I didn't want to create the problems for the senior pastor and the rest of the body. So then it was time to step down. But it wasn't for me so much personally as it was for the good of the body. And then, like Vaughn says, yeah, once you get outside, then okay, what do we do now? But it was about 3 or 4 years before we started the effect. And it was only after we got involved in recovery that another faith community started to make sense. People wanted to start one right off the bat, but I didn't know why I'd be doing it other than for maybe ego reasons so that I had my own church. But once we realized that it was under the covering of a recovery community, that made sense to us. And a group of us then started the effect. So it was kind of an evolution. But, you know, I talked to I've told you the story about Emery Tang, the Franciscan, who did not talk like a Catholic, and the stuff that he taught in the sessions that I went to up at Sarah Retreat. I finally talked to him outside. He said, "Why do you stay a Catholic? I mean, you're not teaching at all like a Catholic." And he just laughed and said, "I've been a priest for 50 years and I'm going to die a priest." His idea was to stay where he was planted and try to reform from the inside out, which is exactly what Jesus was trying to do with Judaism. He didn't want to leave it. He didn't want to burn it down. He wanted to reform it from the inside out. Francis of Assisi wanted to reform the Catholic Church from the inside out in the 13th century. Luther didn't want to leave the Catholic Church. He was trying to reform it in the 16th century, but they excommunicated him. So what was a boy to do? You know, start his own church. So it's like, yeah, I think that was good that you said that, Lori, to check your motives. Why are we doing the things that we're doing? And sometimes the right thing to do is to leave. Sometimes the right thing to do is to stay. But you only figure that out in the doing. There's no rule of thumb that we can overlay on this. One size fits all. It's what do you do as you move through your own journey. And this is what Lawrence did.
I like what Juan said there too. Like different plants grow in different climates, and it's like you definitely find a right climate where you can flourish. And if the rules and the vines are suffocating, then it's not a good climate.
Now we know Vaughn does not grow well in humidity. So we
Exactly.
I think this is also a good message. So sorry, I'm going to pull it to another life thing. You know how sometimes, I know for myself, it's like, oh, if I have this, or if I had that, or if I was here, things would be better. Like for me with Brother Lawrence, he's like, it's just so profound where even in the structure and the situation and all the things, he's being okay with what he has, and he's making this moment enough, which is so powerful. And it's a message beyond just faith. Like that's a message for like everything in life. Like, can right here be enough? Can I find the presence right here in this moment to be enough? Even though not everything is exactly maybe connected to what he believes or what he's finding or what he's experiencing, he's letting right here be enough and be okay, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I want to add too, and this is also for Lori, why some of us stay. So I go to 3 different churches. I grew up Catholic, and I love
I love you. I love you.
I love the Catholic Mass, the ritual, the liturgy. I just love it. It gives me comfort. Then I found it when I needed help. The Catholic Church of my parish was not offering it. So I found a Protestant church. They used to be called Evangelical Free. Now they changed their name actually the last few years. So there's a shift. But they gave me support. It was the fellowship. And they gave me comfort and solace.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was betraying the Catholic Church until I came to the decision that, because there was another lady in my healing, it's called Healing Hearts, and we were doing the 12-step. And I told her that somebody told me, because it gave me comfort to pray the rosary. I would cry and pray it. It gives me comfort to say the prayers. And the other lady said, that's idolatry.
Mm.
And that took me aback because I saw that as solace and comfort and worship to God through the Virgin Mary. So this other lady who's Hispanic, so I know she grew up Catholic too. She goes, Ellen, and she whispers, I pray the rosary. When she said that, I felt free. I can do it, but I don't have to announce it to anybody.
Mm.
I do it on my own. And then I found the effect.
Mm.
This is the challenging question, the one where it makes you think. So I go to all three.
Mhm.
And I don't want to leave any of them.
And
Ellen,
you don't need to. I'm sorry,
Yes.
Marion, go ahead.
oh,
yeah.
I just wanted to tell Ellen that I pray the rosary too.
Oh, thank you. That makes me happy.
Yeah,
too,
it's not
Ellen. I pray it.
idolatry, it's prayer and it's
Prayer.
meditation and it's a love for God and you know we the even the statues and things, I know they say they're idolatry, but for me
Yeah.
it's remembrance. I don't
See-
think it's idolatry.
Yeah, see, that was one thing to another lady from my Bible studies, these ladies, okay? There was a point too where, because now I found my middle ground. I go to mass on Saturdays. I found my church has mass on Saturdays. That way I can go to my fellowship on Sundays. I was about to invite somebody to come to mass with me because she lives 2 blocks away. Then I heard somebody talking at the Bible study saying, oh yeah, I went to this, and I don't know where she went, but there was statues of the Virgin Mary, the statues of the saints, the apostles, and she says, I felt evil there. And that was it. That was a deal breaker. I'm not going to invite any of these to my Catholic mass.
No.
You feel evil from somebody's worship of God,
Uh,
that's it.
Yeah.
You're not welcome in my Catholic church.
No,
I know that was sad because this is a
That's
person
sad.
who also gave me comfort and solace. But if that's her, that's where she's at, then that's where she's at. What can I do? But she's the one who says, oh, you can do yoga.
Oh,
You can do yoga to help your shoulders and hips. And she said,
Mhm.
you have to be careful, Ellen. That's Hindu based.
While you're doing the Stations of the Cross.
So that's her thinking.
If
I
you
know
could
you're
pay me
recording
over,
this on
Ellen, I
YouTube.
would go to mass with you because I have a friend, my sponsor's Catholic.
Oh,
And
huh.
so I've been going to Unitarian because it's really helped me that it's kind of, it's kind of
Yes,
woo
yes.
that you can believe whatever you want to believe.
Right.
But I love the effect because I love talking about Jesus because they don't believe Jesus, they don't believe Jesus the same way. And I can respect their belief. And then I love on Easter, I told Dave, I went to mass and we were singing Christ the Lord has risen today. Then I went to the Unitarian. Spring has sprung, oh beautiful day. It's like celebrate. I can do it.
Yeah, I
I'm
told
my
Dave,
kind of woman.
yeah, last Christmas I went to the Christmas Eve. I went to 3 churches because I love the music. I love the songs. But I just
If you
want to
get
say that I have to be aware too. This is recording. It's in YouTube. I just hope none of the ladies watch this. I don't think so, right? Because the philosophy doesn't jive with them, but it's recorded, right? It's out there.
Ellen, we'll
email it to
protect
her,
you.
I'd like to
We'll protect you, Ellen. You're just a beautiful tapestry. That's what you are.
If
But
you
you
get
know-
to a mosque on Friday and a temple on Saturday, you're in great shape. You got it fully covered.
What we're talking about here is when the rules get out of whack and
Yeah.
rules take over. This is evil, this is idolatry, this is this.
Yeah.
Now we've so slavishly given ourselves over to the rules that we just can't see the forest for the trees anymore. And that's what we're trying to avoid here. And I just want to say, for any of you who pray the rosary, or think that you might want to start praying the rosary, or want a reason why, there's one of our members at the Effect I had coffee with, and he pulled the rosary out of his pocket. He still carries his mother's rosary around, and he says he prays it and it really helps him. And I said, well, of course it does, because it's a contemplative instrument. Every tradition every human tradition has some form of prayer beads. And the whole reason is that if you really think of what the rosary is doing for you, or prayer beads do for you, your conscious brain is like a monkey in a tree, chattering and jumping from branch to branch and distracting you as you watch this thing going on. You know, what you do when you start you're not even counting the beads, you're just following the beads and saying the prayers. You're giving the monkey brain a banana. And then the monkey just goes quietly over to eat that banana for as long as you're going through this. Now your spirit can come out to play. It's a contemplative device. You know, it's just like you need a timer when you're doing your meditational sit, so you're not thinking about the time. When you're using the prayer beads, you don't have to count. You don't have to think about it. You just follow it around the chain until you come back to the beginning again. And it's this beautiful way to just go into this contemplative space by giving this task to the monkey brain and let it eat that banana. So it is a beautiful way to be able to move into a contemplative space, the use of the rosary or prayer beads. So, you know, don't think that there's anything wrong with it, because there's not. You know, if you're trying to do the rosary as kind of a brownie point with God, hey, look, God, I said my rosary today. Well, now that's probably, you know, the wrong kind of motivation. From servile fear to hope for reward. Now we're hoping for reward. How about the point where we just get to this place of just celebrating the relationship? That's what practicing the presence is all about. That's where Brother Lawrence has gotten, and he's trying to show us that we can do it too. And it's exactly in concert with what Jesus is talking about with kingdom. So that's what we're trying to do. Yes, we need the rules and we need the structure, but internally we need to realize that they're training wheels on the bike. And at some point you got to kick those things off so you can really fly. Yeah.
And
you
Dave,
won't be
I love
raining on
what,
somebody else. Go ahead, William.
a couple of weeks back we had talked about when you were talking about the masculine and the feminine, even prayer itself, right, could be idolatry, right? If you're just saying the words and they're meaningless, right? It's so, I mean, I just, when you were talking about the beads, it just made me think of that. Like, our very prayer could be as meaningless as, you know, just trying to get to the end of the beats, basically.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
also a
but
great
yeah, I
way,
think that-
Ellen. It's also
Uh-huh.
a great way to fall asleep at night.
I know it does. Right. Thank you. I needed to hear this. Thank you, Jerry, Lori, Marion. I needed to hear it from other ladies. And you guys played a rosary too.
Yes, I
needed to
do.
hear that.
Especially when I can't sleep or I talk to Mother Mary. Yes.
Yeah, I know. And then but talking about idolatry, I read an article too by this person. It was actually a pastor. He said to, here's the book, here's the Bible. This is also idolatry because I want you to throw it and step on it.
Mm.
It's a paper with prints and ink. Will you step on it and stomp on it? So he's also saying, his point being, that's also idolatry.
Mm.
So yeah.
If we
Don't
put
do
it in
that
the
with the
wrong
Quran.
place. If we put it in the wrong place in our lives, of course. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We could probably go on for quite some time, but the time is
Right.
up. And,
Wow.
and
Wow.
William needs to go to bed, and Vaughn too over there.
Yes.
So thanks again, everyone, for another spirited conversation. And I love where we went with this. And I'm hoping that you're finding a little more permission to be able to color outside the lines, even as you stay true to the structure that you've got in your life and your spiritual formation, because it is important. Okay, Scott, over to you, buddy.
Lord, thank you for being here, that we can explore these concepts and ideas and share with each other and encourage each other, because you're bigger than all our misunderstandings or all our fears or all our worries about getting it right or doing it wrong. We know that you know our hearts, and that's what you're interested in with our hearts, Lord. We may try some things out along the road that are not quite the right way to do things, but we'll live and we learn and we grow from it and we encourage each other with it. So Lord Jesus, we just pray to you right now for our brother Bob, for healing to home or heaven, wherever you are. That's where we want him to be, in peace, surrounded by confidence that everything's okay, and to reassure Anne and the family that you've got this all under control, Lord. Bring that peace that surpasses all understanding and show us how we can minister to our brothers and sisters in their time of need. We thank you and we pray all this in your holy and precious name, Lord Jesus. Amen.
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 All right.
Thanks for sharing,
everybody.
Lori. Glad
Thank
you're here.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
Good night, John.
See you Sunday. Sunday,
Good night.
Sunday.
No,
Bye.
you.
Thank
I
you.
wish you did. Good night, Jerry.
Good night. Good
Good
night.
night, guys.
Good night,
Bye, everyone.
Jim Bob
Have fun. Have fun.
And
Have fun
John
at lunch,
Boy.
and
Casablanca.
John Boy.
Good night.
Bye all.
Good night, John Boy. Oh my God. Good evening. Wish I could be there for lunch.
I wish you could too, man. And Mulan. I haven't had a
Yes.
Mulan
Oh,
since you left.
God.
So
Miss you so much, man. There was so many things I would want to talk about. So great you're here. Good doing what you're doing.
well, at least we're here, right, Vaughn?
Yes, exactly. Okay, blessing and peace.
buddy.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
And by Linda, by Jordana, see you guys on the weekend.
Okay, see you guys on the weekend.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.